Chapter 96 The School Event. Part 2. A few hours ago, in the morning when the sun was just about rising, the windows of Mia's room were tightly shut and her curtains were pulled down, making the room appear dim as the light of her room was also turned off since last night. She lay on the bed with several blankets covering her entire body, including her head, as she was shivering from a severe cold. She had ignored the feverish feeling from last night, but when she woke up this morning, she had felt like her entire body was on fire, and her head had been throbbing like it would split into two. She could barely open her eyes from how weak she felt. Because her mother usually woke up before her and would go to her eatery very early, Mia was left alone at home with no one to look after her. She had reached out for her phone and wanted to call her mother, but then she decided against it, as she wouldn't want to worry her. She had been lying under the blanket, unable to even get off the bed and prepare for school. Mia had no idea what had gone wrong with her all of a sudden when she had been just fine yesterday morning. She wasn't the kind to fall sick easily, but now she was ill all of a sudden. Perhaps it was because she had been drenched yesterday with the wine, but she doubted that was the case. Mia would have wanted to stay at home today and rest, but then remembering how Carlos and Rain had worked hard to get her into the school event, she didn't want to disappoint them in any way by not showing up. However, the thought of standing up from her bed made her more exhausted and nauseous. She didn't want to go. She didn't want to stand up, but she had to, not for herself, but for her friends. With those thoughts, Mia pushed herself off the bed with her limbs still shaking. Unable to hold still, she fell back on the bed with a light thud. Not bothering to get up again, she stared blankly at her ceiling. For some reason, she suspected that the wine that had gotten into her mouth yesterday had something to do with her sudden sickness this morning. The wine had tasted weird on her tongue, and she would be dumb not to know someone had planned for all that. The student who carried the wine had pretended to trip over her and poured it on her head while making it appear like an accident. Mia was aware that most of the students in Ivy Grove didn't like her, but she couldn't imagine them scheming so she would not make it to the event today. Who could have done such a thing to her? And what was in that wine that was now messing up her body in a bad way? A hot tear slid down the corner of Mia's eyes as she continued to stare blankly at the ceiling because she couldn't get up. She hated it when people schemed against her when she had nothing against them. She had never wanted to be a part of this event, but she had joined because she needed the prize money. But then she changed her mind about winning, as she believed she wasn't good enough to stand with the rest of the beautiful women participating. She hadn't taken the event as anything, but that someone was still trying to make her back out by scheming against her. A faint bitter smile graced her lips as she clenched her fingers around her sheets and pushed herself to a sitting position. The person who played such a cruel game on her must have wanted her not to show up, but she would prove them wrong by showing up. Despite her head throbbing like there was a hammer banging her skull, Mia managed to get out of bed. She knew she needed to see a doctor, but she would do that after the event. She wasn't going to let Rain and Carlos down, nor was she going to let the person who didn't want her to show up today win. Mia forced herself to take a hot shower that only made the cold in her body worsen, but she ignored it and went to dress up. She wore a baggy sweater and jeans along with thick socks as if she was going out in winter. She also wore a cap on her head. When she was done, she only carried her phone, as the clothes she would be wearing were already in school. Besides, apart from the fact that she didn't want to disappoint Carlos and Rain, she was going to the university to glimpse the sight of a particular someone who had been lingering in her mind since yesterday night they had spoken. When Mia arrived at the university, the grounds were already packed with people. Because of her winter style of dressing, heads were turning in her direction, and people were staring at her weirdly as everyone was wearing formal attire, but she was wearing winter clothes. She kept her head down and ignored their stares. To avoid getting even more attention on herself, Mia went to the changing room through the back door, where only a handful of people were walking through. When she got to the changing room that was divided by wooden screens from every other participant, Mia entered the one assigned to her yesterday, where her clothes and makeup artist were supposed to be in. However, the room was empty with no one inside but a mirror and makeup kits lying randomly on the table. Assuming that the makeup artist assigned to her might have gone out and would come back, Mia decided to wear her dress which she had hung inside the wardrobe yesterday and wait for her. Taking off her sweater in her weakened state seemed to be a challenging thing to do because of her shaking limbs and throbbing head. Nonetheless, she didn't let it stop her from doing what she knew she had to do before the makeup artist showed up. From the voices in the other rooms, she could tell there were still a few participants getting ready in their assigned rooms. She stripped off her clothes until she was wearing only her bra and panty. The air conditioner in the building made her shiver in cold, and she hugged herself as she approached the wardrobe. When she opened it, she was expecting to find the clothes and shoes she had put in the wardrobe yesterday, but to her utter surprise, the wardrobe was empty with nothing of hers. Mia stood stunned before the opened wardrobe door for a moment before she began to look around the room to see if perhaps the people assigned to help her dress up had changed the position of her dress. But even after searching every corner of the small room, there was nothing like her blue dress. After exhausting her little energy to search the room, Mia could barely stand on her feet again and crouched down, grabbing her head with tears filling her eyes and blurring her vision. Who could have taken her dress, and where was the makeup artist and the rest of the girls who were supposed to help her do her hair, just like they had told her yesterday? Mia thought in anger. First, they made her sick, and now they took her dress. Who could have done such a thing? Mia thought as she continued to hug herself on the floor with rage swelling her head and mind. Her fists clenched tightly, with her nails digging into her palms, drawing blood, but she was completely unaware of it. The person who didn't want her on the stage today surely was determined to keep her away. Why was she even desperate to be part of the event when everyone didn't want her to be? Because she wanted to prove to herself for the first time that she was good enough for something. Mia decided. She might not have wanted to join in the first place, but deep down in her heart, she had desired to be on that stage and prove to everyone that she was more than the plain Jane they called her. She wanted to feel beautiful and confident in her own skin by at least winning third place, but it seemed fate didn't want her to be there today. Mia thought to herself as she pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them before burying her face between her pulled-up knees in the corner. She would stay here until the event was over, and she would leave as a loser, just like the person who schemed against her wanted. She had never been good enough anyway, so the heavens must have saved her the embarrassment she would face on the stage by forcing her to quit. Carlos would be disappointed, Rain would be disappointed, but she no longer cared. She would hide in the corner just like she had done as a child when she would be scared of her nightmares. As she curled in the corner, she could hear the loud music coming from the performance hall, but she blocked the noise out by singing the only song that brought her solace, the song that had been carved into her heart and soul. Longing. Her voice was shaky as she was trying her best not to cry from how much anger she felt towards the person who stole her dress and made her sick. Perhaps it was due to her sickness, but her emotions were all over the place, making her feel alone and abandoned at the moment. Deep down, she had a feeling Diane had something to do with this, but she no longer cared. As Mia was sobbing in the corner, she didn't realize the door to the dressing room had opened until she heard it click locked. Her head jerked up to see who had walked in, but because of the tears that filled her eyes, her vision was blurry until she blinked and let the tears fall. Was she able to see the person clearly? Her heart subconsciously skipped a beat at the sight of him. Thinking she must be hallucinating, Mia's lips trembled, and her tears began to slowly roll down her cheeks. Imagining her ice cube standing at the door, she felt her heart ache, and she could no longer control her messed up emotions and stood up. He was standing there looking down at her with an unreadable expression on his face. He was wearing a gray suit with his tie left loose. His black hair looked disheveled as if he'd run his fingers through them. His forehead glistened with sweat under the light of the room, as if he'd run all the way here. As Mia took in his appearance, she believed he wasn't real because he had no reason to be here. Then, without thinking, she walked to him and slipped her arms around his narrowed waist and hugged him tightly. Mia felt his body stiffen under her embrace, but she tightened her hold and allowed herself to cry. Thinking he wasn't real, she didn't care that she was only wearing her underwear and rubbed her face against his chest with her tears streaming down her eyes. "Leo, why you are here? Please, don't leave me. I feel lonely," she pleaded with a shaky voice that was choked with emotions and tightened her hold as if she feared he would disappear. If she was hallucinating, then she wanted it to stay like this until the event was over and she could leave. Chapter 97 The School Event, Part 3. Neil, who was suddenly embraced by the girl he had come to lash his anger on for making him worry about her, was taken aback by her actions. He had angrily rushed to her changing room after the student had told him she was here, but he hadn't expected to come in and find her in such a condition, where she was sitting in a corner wearing only her underwear and crying alone like an abandoned child. He had expected to come in and find her busy getting ready, but here she was hugging him. He didn't move for a moment because she had taken him by surprise, but when he felt her warm tears soak into his shirt, he felt an unknown rage and the urge to kill someone. Someone who had dared to make her cry. And when he heard her shaky voice as she pleaded for him to stay with her, Neil lost all control. Who was the bastard who hurt his little kitten? He could let go of anything because of the military protocol, but not when someone dared to make someone he was interested in cry. The more she cried while hugging him, the angrier he felt. And when Neil Wayner was angered, all hell could come loose. "Who the fuck made you cry?" he questioned darkly as he looked down at her fragile figure hugging his waist. Mia, who heard his dark, ominous voice and the rumbling anger in his chest, wanted to step away from him, but his arm was quick to come around her body to keep her against him. Was she hallucinating, or was he really standing in front of her? His arm around her body felt so real and strong, she couldn't help but fall back into his arm to seek the comfort she was longing for. My clothes were gone when I arrived here, and I can't participate without them," murmured Mia against his chest as she drew a nervous circle with her finger on his back. Neil's eyes narrowed. "Is that why you are crying? If that's the case, then don't cry because I have brought you some new clothes," he said calmly while pushing away from the hug to show her the bags he had been carrying around the whole time. He had been angry to realize just this morning that she hadn't taken the clothes he had requested to be delivered to her in his condo on Friday, and she hadn't bothered to tell him that the stupid fashion assistant had been rude to her until he saw it on the camera footage of his house. He had immediately made sure the stupid woman would never get another job again and had sent for another delivery. However, despite getting her new clothes, he had intended to scold the living crap out of her for not taking his present, but now he had come in here to find his little kitten in a vulnerable state that left him unable to scold her again. Mia, who pushed away from the hug to look at the bags in his hand, immediately realized she wasn't hallucinating. Her eyes slightly widened as she tried to move away from him, but he didn't let her go far and pulled her hand to keep her in front of him. "Why didn't you tell me about what happened on Friday between you and the fashion assistant?" asked Neil coldly as he kept her from moving away from him. "Wasn't she the one who hugged him? Then why was she trying to run away?" he thought as his silver eyes bored down into her watery, large brown eyes. However, a deep frown was quick to make its way to his forehead as he felt that her usual cold temperature felt strangely hot to his touch. Even her face appeared abnormally flushed, with her lips looking slightly pale. Neil let the bags in his right hand fall as he raised his hand and cupped her flushed cheek. She didn't move away from his touch and instead leaned against his palm like a kitten and closed her eyes. Her lips were slightly parted as she breathed through her mouth, and she used her hand to keep his palm against her cheek as if she didn't want him to pull away. "Your hand is warm and soothing," murmured Mia in a small voice that was barely above a whisper. Her temperature had already risen, and his large, warm palm cupping her cheek made her want it to remain like that. She didn't even realize she was using her hand to keep his palm on her cheek until his other hand pressed against the hand she kept on his. "You look sick. What's wrong with you?" Neil found himself asking in concern as he felt her temperature. She hummed as she let her hands fall on her side, but his did not leave her cheek as his thumb gently caressed it. "I feel sick, but I'm fine," she assured him, seeing the deep frown that had come to settle between his brows. "You don't look fine. Let's go. I will take you to see the university doctor," he said while he pulled her hand, but then stopped when he noticed she was still only wearing her underwear, which he hadn't noticed clearly as she had hugged him the moment he had entered. She wore a push-up black lace bra that pushed up her ample breasts and made them look fuller and bigger than they were. The swell of her breast glimmered under the lights, and it made his throat suddenly feel dry. He stepped back and let his eyes trail her body as he couldn't help himself from admiring the body he had dreamt of touching ever since he had kissed her on his couch. She had a very slim waist that only emphasized her rounded hips, with long, beautiful legs that looked perfect for his fingers to caress and touch. As if only being aware of her lack of clothes from how his eyes were trailing her body, Mia quickly intended to find her way towards her discarded clothes, but he pulled her back yet again and kept her from covering herself. However, his eyes were no longer trailing her body, as they were glued on the scar on her thigh. "What happened to you there?" He leaned down and used his fingers to gently touch the dark scar that was already fading, but the skin around the place looked slightly wrinkled. His frown deepened as he felt like the scar was like that of a deep cut. Mia, feeling his touch on her biggest insecurity, quickly moved her legs back in embarrassment and pressed her thighs together to hide the scar. "It's a childhood scar. My mom said I got it from the fire that took place in our old residence," she muttered, feeling self-conscious about her lack of clothes, but the man in front of her wasn't letting go of her hand and kept her in place with his intense silver eyes. He looked into her eyes as if he was trying to search for something before he let go of her hand and said, "Get dressed. I will take you to see a doctor. Forget about participating in the contest, you need to be treated." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. However, Mia shook her head. "No, I want to participate. I will see a doctor once the event is over," she declared. Though Mia had decided to drop out of the competition because she no longer had a dress, now that her Ice Cube professor had gotten her a dress, she wanted to participate. Her fever had calmed down a bit, and she felt she could participate now. Neil frowned upon hearing her words. "You look like someone who will fall anytime soon, Harrison." No, I want to participate. Please don't force me not to. Someone didn't want me to participate today, but I want to prove that person wrong," she said pleadingly as she looked up to meet his disapproving eyes. She knew from experience how he could be when he told her to do something and she refused. He could carry her to the doctor despite her disapproval if he wanted to. Thus, she used a gentle approach to let him allow her to go out. When he didn't say anything and only stared down at her with his frosty gray eyes, she added, "Please, it means a lot to me." He sighed in defeat. "All right, you can participate," he declared, and he watched how a small smile broke her lips apart, making her dimples prominent, causing his chest to warm up with a strange feeling. Since she wanted to, he wouldn't stop her as long as she could handle it. Besides, he also had to be out there and get back to his business before the rest of his men would realize he had been gone for long. "Thank you," Mia beamed as she bent down to carry the bags he had dropped. However, because of her throbbing head, she let out a small cry, making Neil pull her arm and make her stand straighter. "What's wrong?" he asked with a scowl on his handsome face. "My head," she gestured to her head with her index finger while pouting like a kid. But seeing that he was about to tell her not to participate, Mia said, "I can do it. I will call Rain to assist me with dressing." She moved away from him and took the robe hanging on a chair, unaware of how she was giving him the full view of her behind. His eyes didn't fail to follow her movements and how her rear end looked rounded and enticing enough for him to imagine touching them. He cleared his throat, but he didn't look away like a gentleman was supposed to do because he was no gentleman, until she quickly wore the robe to cover herself. Then she walked to her bag and picked up her phone. Mia tried to call Rain, but she didn't pick up. She tried several times, but she got the same answer. Hearing the loud music from outside, Mia could tell Rain wouldn't be able to hear her phone ring. Thus, she was left with herself. Chapter 98: Princess Treatment in the Dressing Room. As Mia turned to tell the man in the room that she would be fine on her own, she saw that he had picked up the bags containing the dress he'd brought for her. Then, he glanced at her with a serious expression. "Tell me what to do. I will help you get ready," he announced in a calm voice as if it were a normal thing for him to help her dress up. Neil knew she wasn't feeling completely fine, but since she was determined to participate in the competition, he wasn't going to stop her. She was so much like him when it came to determination. He was the kind to do something he had set his mind on doing no matter what condition he was in. Apart from death, nothing else could stop him. Thus, he understood the girl in front of him. Even though he had never in his life touched a female dress, not to mention helped them into it, he couldn't leave knowing she wasn't ready yet. Mia, who heard his words, was taken aback. Her face flushed deep red. I can do it. Don't argue with me, Harrison. I have other things to do. Come here, and let's get you into this dress," he said firmly, leaving no room for argument as he pulled out a striking purple dress from the bag and lifted it up. The dress caught the lights in the room, making Mia momentarily spellbound as she gazed at how beautiful it looked. Despite her embarrassment, Mia found herself walking towards him as she stared at the striking purple dress in his hand. She had seen the logo on the bags and knew it was from an expensive brand in the country, and even though she would like to reconsider taking the clothes, she was desperate. She watched as he struggled to find the neck of the gown, and when she was about to take it from him, he got it right and told her to take off her robe. Blushing deeply, she meekly took off the robe and stood before him in just her underwear. With a serious expression, he moved closer and put it over her head. Though Mia could dress by herself and the only help she would be needing were with makeup and hairstyling, she didn't protest when he helped her with the dress. "Bring your hand up," he said softly as he opened the sleeve of the dress. Mia did as she was told, like a child getting dressed up by her mother. She couldn't help the faint smile that threatened to break her lips at how concentrated he looked when pulling her arm into the lace sleeves. He pulled the gown over her body and pulled her hair up from behind. However, he stopped when he noticed that the back of the gown was open. It had a flesh-toned sheer fabric that made it look like it was open from the top part of the back to the lower part. "Why is the back this open?" he asked, as if Mia was supposed to know when he was the one who bought the dress for her. Mia, however, was too fascinated by the gown to pay heed to his question. She stared at her reflection in the mirror with slightly widened eyes. Mia couldn't believe her own reflection in the mirror. The gown looked so beautiful she couldn't tear her eyes away from it. It was a stunning purple gown with a flesh-toned sheer fabric at the shoulders and upper chest area. It had a fitted bodice that pushed up her bosom with long, sheer sleeves, a fitted waist, and a full skirt that flowed to the floor. The lace details on the fabric added a touch of elegance and sophistication to the overall design of the gown. As Mia admired the gown, she couldn't help but think that it looked like one of those dresses celebrities wear to red carpets. "This must have cost a fortune," she murmured as she ran her hands on the front of the gown while looking at the man behind her in the reflection. But he brushed away her words as he knew if he told her the price of the dress and who had designed it, she might reject it. He didn't have much time to stay here and convince her into taking it. Thus, he didn't reply to her words and instead moved to her front and said, "What is next? Are we going to put on the shoes first, or the accessories?" He asked calmly as he picked up the other small bags with a passive expression on his face, as he was trying his best to look past the revealing part of the dress he had bought. Though it suited her perfectly, if he knew it was going to reveal this much flesh, he wouldn't have picked this one from the pictures sent to him. However, because he had noticed she loved purple, he'd picked this one. "I have to do my hair first," said Mia as she took the comb from the dressing table and did a quick, simple style for herself. She packed her hair into a messy bun, as that was the only style she could think of at this moment. Then, not being skilled with makeup, she just applied the powder and left the foundation, as she wouldn't want to ruin her face. One thing Mia was grateful about her face was the fact that she had no blemishes or pimples. Thus, she didn't spend a long time trying to cover anything but the little swelling under her eyes, which had appeared because she was sick. She brushed her eyebrows and straightened her natural long eyelashes, then applied a faint lipstick on her pale lips. While Mia was busy doing her makeup, Neil patiently stood behind her with his arms crossed against his chest. He could hear Liam's voice asking where he was from the hidden earpiece in his ears, but he ignored him as he had muted his own part. He didn't know what he was doing waiting on a woman that could jeopardize his mission, but then he also couldn't walk away from her knowing she had no one to assist her. For years, Neil had made himself into a man who never cared about others unless they held importance to his only goal in life and mission. But he didn't know when he started to let himself care about someone who he had once liked as a young boy. She was supposed to remain in his past, but the more he got entangled with her now, the more he didn't want to let go and wanted to keep her. "I'm done," Mia announced, breaking him out of his thoughts as she glanced at him from the reflection in the mirror where he stood casually behind her with a passive expression and his gray eyes appearing thoughtful. But when he looked up at her reflection, Mia noticed how his expression changed into admiration. His bold eyes moved over her with unhidden masculine appreciation. Pride of ownership was evident in his possessive gaze, and Mia's stomach jumped nervously when she noticed it. He had never looked at her like this before, as if she were a tasty morsel he was planning to devour at his leisure. Neil found himself at a loss for words. He was more than pleased and proud at how she looked in the dress he got for her. Though she had looked beautiful without the touch-up she did to her face and hair, she looked even more elegantly alluring after the touch-up. Her feverish face now looked normal, and her large brown eyes seemed more prominent with thick, long lashes hovering over them. "You have a knack for transforming from an adorable kitten to an incredibly alluring woman," he remarked nonchalantly as he approached her with the other bags. Thank you," Mia replied, not knowing if that was meant as a compliment or just a remark. "I think," she added. "It was meant as a compliment, Carita," he reassured with a slight frown as he noticed her uncertainty about his compliment. Touched by his weird compliment, Mia observed as he took out a box from the bag he was holding. He dropped the other bag on the table. Even though she was curious to ask him what "Carita" means, she kept quiet, knowing how he never liked to answer her questions. Instead, she watched as he opened the elegant black box he had pulled out of the bag. He took out a stunning purple necklace and a set of earrings, which he handed for her to wear. The necklace had a large teardrop-shaped purple gemstone surrounded by smaller white stones, while the earrings he gave her to wear were shaped like purple teardrops. When she finished wearing the earrings, he stood behind her. Wordlessly, he pushed the little strands of hair falling on her neck aside. His warm fingers sent tiny tremors down her spine as he removed the necklace and laid it around her slim, long neck. In the mirror, Mia watched his expressionless features as he fastened the necklace clasp at the back of her neck, then lifted his eyes to hers, studying the diamond at her neck. "Do you like them?" he asked, his whispered voice falling on her earlobe, making her cheeks heat up from how close he stood behind her. Mia nodded her head as she was unable to form any words but to say, "I've never seen beautiful gemstones as the ones on the necklace and earrings. They look fit for an heiress. They belonged to a Russian princess a century ago, but it had been remolded to fit this generation's style. It suits you better than it would another heiress," he whispered huskily as he turned her around to face him without giving her any chance to digest his words about the necklace belonging to an ancient princess. He pushed her gently to sit on the chair behind her as he took out another box of shoes. However, Mia was oddly touched that he apparently thought of her worthy of such a priceless necklace rather than argued about how he shouldn't have gotten it for her. When he crouched down to help her wear her shoes, Mia suddenly felt like a princess as he held her ankle and slipped her feet into the elegant closed-toe high heel. He did the same with the other foot, and her toes involuntarily curled up inside the shoe as his finger grazed her skin. When he looked up from his crouched-down position to ask, "Can you walk with this?" Mia felt her heart burst forth with a tingling, warm feeling, then it started to beat faster. She had never been treated like a princess by a man in all of her life, but here she was being tended to by the last person on earth she would imagine would ever care about her. Though they had known each other for a short amount of time and there was no name to this relationship between them, deep down Mia felt like she had known him for a long time, and he had always been there for her whenever she needed someone. He appeared like a heartless man, but Mia realized he was the most caring man in her life. And the thought that after he left the school she would no longer see him again sent a stabbing ache to her heart that made her eyes swell up with tears. She would miss him terribly. Neil glanced up at her, waiting to hear her reply to his question, and when he noticed the tears glimmering in her eyes, he frowned. But before he could ask why she was crying, Mia surprised him as she leaned down and pressed her mouth to his and wrapped her arms around his neck. He had been caught by surprise, but when she kissed him first, he deepened it and plunged his tongue into her mouth. Unknown to them as they kissed, there was a camera planted in the dressing room. Chapter 99. Stunned by her transformation. At the performance stage, all the students and guests were seated in their designated seats. The judges were positioned at the front, while the audience sat at the back. The paparazzi's cameras were already flashing, capturing the art performance students as they showcased their theater play on the beautifully decorated stage. Following their performance, the next event would be the selection of the Queen and King, followed by a singing performance by a famous singer who had been invited. As the drama unfolded on stage, the contestants prepared backstage, ready to take turns presenting their skills to the judges. The women would catwalk and showcase their beauty and intelligence to the audience, while the men would display their talents. Afterward, they would return to the stage, and the audience would vote for who they believed deserved the crown of the year. The candidate with the most votes would be crowned, accompanied by their images taken by their photographer in the days leading up to the event displayed on a background screen. This would also provide an opportunity for the photojournalism student who captured the photos to establish their future career. Carlos could be seen among the audience, where he had given up on everything and was sitting in the far end. His expression looked so down, like he was going to cry, as he watched the other photojournalism students getting excited about the next event that would take place, while his own partner, Mia, didn't even come to school. "Serves you right, Mackenzie, for choosing a plain Jane as your partner," said one of Carlos' classmates who stood over him. "We told you she's going to let you down, but you said you trust her. Mia Harrison is not fit for all this. She's a coward," laughed the boy in mockery, making Carlos clutch tightly to his camera to control his emotions from breaking down. He could cry at this moment for how disappointed he was at Mia and himself. He was doing this to prove to his family, who were currently watching the show from home, that he was good enough for something, even though they believed he could do nothing but be a loser for acting like a sissy. "Aw, Carlos Mackenzie is going to cry. What a sissy you are. Don't worry, "Watch as my partner Diane wins the show today and see how photography is done by experts," said another boy from his class who was a team with Diane. At the backstage room, the king and queen participants still had time to rehearse their walk and prepare for the questions that would be asked of them before the theater play was over on the stage. However, none of them were doing what was expected of them to do backstage, as they believed their beauty and confidence were enough for them. Instead, they were gossiping and mingling with each other. Diane could be seen among the others, where she wore a beautiful, elegant mermaid orange dress that clutched her body in the right places. Her face, which was already naturally pretty, was packed with heavy makeup, giving her the appearance of an unrealistic doll. She stood confidently among the others with her head held high, as she was confident she would win the crown today from the looks of the dresses of the others. She glanced around, giving the rest of the female participants around her a scornful look. As her friends weren't part of the participants, she was just forcing herself to mingle with the others as she wanted nothing but their compliments and to boost her morale. "Diane, you look absolutely stunning. I remember seeing that dress in a magazine last week. It's one of Ellie Hamburg's top designs from years ago. You must have spent a fortune to acquire it," one of the students desperately trying to gain favor with the popular girl remarked. The entire city was aware of the influence held by the Foster family, and Diane's dress was a clear indication of their wealth. Ellie Hamburg's designs were renowned worldwide, but only a select few could afford them or had the privilege of owning one of her earlier creations, let alone the latest ones. Diane's lips curved into a smile, although it seemed a bit forced due to her makeup. "It's worth a fortune," she said. "I had planned to purchase one of her latest creations, but it hasn't been completed yet, and I couldn't wait for it to arrive in Zen." She boasted, however, it was a lie. She did have the intention to buy it, but her family's influence wasn't high enough for her to acquire the designer's exclusive limited edition pieces, reserved only for the president's family and A-list celebrities. However, she didn't want to appear inferior to her followers. "Wow, it's incredible that you can even purchase her previous designs. I couldn't even secure an appointment at the fashion house, let alone buy a dress. I must admit, you're one fortunate princess," another student praised, her eyes filled with envy. "Ah, it's no big deal. My family and Ellie are close. If you want, I can put in a few words for you and you can get an appointment with the fashion house," Diane suggested casually to make it seem like she knew the designer personally, while in truth she had never even met her in person and had only gotten the dress by luck. "Well, that's great. You're so kind, Diane. I wouldn't even mind if you win the crown today because I know our school activities will be more enjoyable with you as our queen." "Yes, I agree with that, Maya. Diane is the perfect fit for the position," added another person, trying to start a conversation with the popular girl. She then asked, "I thought Plain Jane was supposed to be here with us. I don't see her anywhere. Did she get intimidated by us? It's good she's not even here today. I can't even believe that someone as plain as that girl was going to participate in an event that was meant for beauties like us. She has no class or any sense of fashion. She dresses like my grandma," laughed one of the girls, with the others laughing along with her in agreement. "I would have loved to see her come today so we can rub it in her face how plain she looks. I bet she plans to wear one of those used dresses sold in local markets." The poor thing saved herself the embarrassment by not showing up. "What do you think, Diane?" "Well, what can I say? I have nothing against her, but the girl is an ungrateful bitch. She must be embarrassed to show up, which I totally understand, judging from how poor her family is. Tisk, I can't believe she thought for a second that she can stand a chance against someone like me," said Diane with an arrogant air she carried around her. She then looked behind the girls where the boys were standing and noticed Alaric. "Excuse me, ladies, I will be right back." Saying that, she walked towards the boys while the other girls gazed at her in envy. "She's so beautiful," remarked one of the girls, with the rest nodding in agreement. "It seems our plan did work out as the bitch didn't show up today," whispered Alaric, who approached Diane halfway and stood beside her, where he was also dressed in an expensive suit custom made for only him. "Of course she won't show up, and even if she dares to show up, she would have nowhere to be on the stage unless she would come out without any clothes," remarked Diane as she looked up at her ex, who they had stopped talking to, but because of the mutual hate they shared towards the Plain Jane, they had started to talk. She took in his attire and realized it was breathtaking. He looked handsome, with the suit hugging his lean, muscular build. He was tall and had a face that would make a girl drop dead, but ever since Diane had set her eyes on their new professor, she believed no other man could come close to his aura and looks, and her taste in men changed completely. But the fact that the professor had looked over someone as beautiful as herself and went after a plain Jane, that was a big insult to Diane's ego. She would never let the girl take everything away from her like she did in the past. In high school, the girl had done nothing but made her life a living hell. However, the fact that Mia kept acting like they had never met until Ivy Grove irked Diane to no end. And she would be dead to allow Mia to compete with her today on the stage. "What else did you do apart from the thing I gave you to put in the wine yesterday?" asked Alaric as he took in the appearance of the beautiful woman before him, who he now regretted breaking up with. Diane smirked. "I took away her clothes," she declared, while keeping away the part where she had planted a camera in the dressing room and told someone to manage it, as she intended to ruin Mia's image completely today in school if she were to strip naked before realizing her clothes were gone. That would be if she dared to show up, which Diane doubted, but just to be safe, she had gone and made arrangements to destroy the girl completely on a live show event. "By the way, what is that thing you gave me to put in the wine?" Diane asked in curiosity, as the liquid he gave her yesterday was black, but she hadn't questioned it and only did as she was told. Alaric had said they just needed a drop of it to fall into her mouth, and that would do the work for them. As Alaric was about to reply, surprise gasps broke out from the other students in the backstage room, making Diane and Alaric turn at the same time, only for their eyes to widen in astonishment at the sight of the person who walked into the room. "What the fuck, how is she here?" muttered Alaric in disbelief as he took in the appearance of the school's plain Jane, who had now transformed into a complete elegant woman. Diane stood frozen in place as she couldn't believe her eyes at the sudden appearance of the girl they had all believed wouldn't make it today and would be lying somewhere on her sickbed. To make things worse, she had walked in completely transformed. Diane's knees almost gave way as she recognized the gown Mia was wearing at the moment, and her eyes widened even more as if they would fall out of their sockets. "Wasn't that? Oh my goodness! How did she get her hands on an Ellie Hamburg latest creation? That dress costs more than millions," whispered someone among the girls in the room, where the words fell on Diane, who couldn't believe that someone below her was wearing something she hadn't been able to buy despite using all of her family's connections in the country. She would have called it a fake if it wasn't for the small gold logo sign on the waistline that made people distinguish the fake from the real design. Furthermore, this had just been released a day ago, which made it even more impossible for its fake to be available in malls. Chapter 100: The Lipstick Stain. The girls who had previously insulted Mia were left speechless as they gazed from Diane to the stunning young woman who had just entered the room. Despite Mia's simple makeup, she looked absolutely gorgeous in the extravagant purple dress that resembled that of an angel. On the contrary, Diane had heavily applied makeup, giving her an almost artificial and doll-like appearance. Didn't Diane mention that Ellie Hamburg's latest creations weren't available for purchase yet? But look, Mia is wearing the most talked-about design in the fashion industry. I'm not sure how she managed to get her hands on a dress that even A-list celebrities would struggle to obtain, but one thing is for certain: she looks breathtaking in it. In fact, I'm starting to believe that she's more beautiful than Diane, commented the same girls who were previously praising Diane. Even the boys in the room could barely take their eyes from Mia as she walked to stand on one side of the room without paying any of them any attention. "Phew, I never thought our school's plain Jane was this hot until today. So she's hiding a lot behind those baggy t-shirts she usually wore. Goodness gracious, if I knew she's this pretty, I would have hit on her before this," remarked another boy from the male participants who, until now, had never even spared Mia a second glance due to her reputation for being the school's plain Jane. However, she had suddenly transformed into a young, innocent, beautiful woman. Her simple makeup and stunning dress made her appear different from the other girls in the room. Mia, who stood at one side of the room, could feel and hear the others talk about her as they stared at her in admiration. Her face was still heated up from the intense kiss she had shared with her ice cube. She couldn't believe she had started the kiss. It was a bold, daring move on her part, and she hadn't intended to do it, but her swirling emotions had pushed her into kissing him when she realized it could be the last time. She had started it, but he took control of it and kissed her breathless even after she tried to pull away for the fear that she would transfer her fever to him. But the man had refused to let go and said, "Stay still for me, Carita. Let me teach you how to kiss me properly next time." He had said those words in a husky, deep whisper that fell directly on her lips and made her automatically freeze in place as his lips and tongue did wicked things to her mouth, where she had to reapply her lipstick afterwards. What made Mia so happy at that moment when he kissed her and whispered those words was the fact that he had said he would teach her how to kiss him properly next time, which meant this wasn't the last and they would meet and kiss again after today. She might not know the meaning of querida, but whenever he called her that, a tingling warmth always danced in her stomach. And she made a mental note to check it up on Google after the event. Mia thought with a smile playing on her slightly swollen lips. That cold, frosty man made sure she was breathless with his kiss before he released her. He wouldn't have even stopped kissing her if it weren't for the announcement that the contest was about to start. Another shy, innocent, faint smile graced Mia's lips as she felt the butterflies fluttering in her stomach intensify at the thought of the kiss and how she had been treated like a princess in the changing room. However, as she was daydreaming in the corner about Neil, she heard approaching footsteps and glanced up only to see that it was Diane. "I see you are still competing with me, Mia. Do you think by wearing a dress worth millions means you can compare with me?" "Ha, not a chance, girl. You are nothing but a slum girl. Don't think anyone will vote for you at the finals today. You might be wearing a beautiful dress, but you will forever be plain," taunted Diane with a smug expression while trying hard not to show how angry and jealous she was of her dream dress being worn by her greatest enemy. However, what she wasn't worried about was the fact that no matter how Mia tried, she could never be as beautiful as she was. "You know what, Diane," Mia said as she turned to look at the girl in front of her. "You are that desperate little princess who's so insecure about herself and would do anything in her power to drag down another person. I don't know what I did to you to make you take me as a target of your bullying, and I've had enough of hearing about how much I made your life miserable in your delusional high school. But I want you to know that I know about the dirty little game you played on me," Mia said. Then she took a step forward and stood in Diane's breathing space before leaning down to whisper in her ear, "I will teach you never to mess with me again by winning the crown over you today. Watch me take the thing you desired so badly, Diane." Saying this, Mia walked away to the other side of the room, leaving the shocked, angry Diane frozen in place. Diane's hands clenched into tight fists, with her long nails digging into her palm, but she didn't feel the pain as she was too consumed by her fury to care. She walked towards where she put her bag and took out her phone. With her lips still pressed into an angry line, she sent a text message to someone, and a smirk played on her face when the person replied to her with a video. Without hesitation, Diane typed back a simple, "Display it later." Back in the performance hall, Neil made his way to where Liam was still looking around the hall to find him. When he saw him coming, Liam rushed towards him. "What the hell, man? Where did you disappear to? I have been trying to talk to you through your earpiece, but your mic was mute," remarked Liam in frustration, as he knew the importance of how they must not mess up today, as today was their last chance in knowing who was leading the most wanted illegal group in the country. Liam took in his friend's appearance and noticed that the bag he had been holding earlier before he disappeared was no longer in his hands. And the front of his shirt was crinkled, and his tie was nowhere to be found, not to mention the red stain on the side of his lip that immediately caught his attention. "Relax, Liam. I had something important to attend to. Has any of the men reported spotting anything in the premises yet?" asked Neil, unaware of how his friend was staring at the lipstick mark that had stained his lips when he kissed Mia earlier, as his eyes were now glued to the stage as he spoke, looking at the student catwalking down the stage. Neil wanted to see Mia's appearance before he'd leave to get back to his work. When he didn't hear a reply from Liam, he looked away from the stage and glanced at his friend with narrowed eyes. "I just asked you a question. Why are you staring at me like an idiot?" he questioned, his tone slightly laced with irritation, as he hated repeating himself to people, regardless of how close he was to that person. However, Liam suddenly chuckled in amusement before pulling out his handkerchief and handing it to him. "You might want to use this." Neil looked from the handkerchief he handed him to his face as if Liam must have lost a screw in his head. But before he could speak, Liam spoke again. "I never knew you to be a man who sneaked away from his mission to take a girl to a corner, not to mention you didn't even bother to wipe off the evidence of it from you. Tisk, you have a red lipstick mark on your lips and the side of it. You might want to wipe it off before you appear before that strict uncle of yours." Wordlessly, Neil took the handkerchief and aggressively wiped off his lips while muttering a silent curse in his mind. He couldn't believe he hadn't noticed it until Liam pointed it out now. He had been lost in the kiss like some fool and hadn't wanted it to end until the announcement in the hall. Neil had been feeling an intense desire swell inside him from just that mere kiss, and he had tossed his tie away as it was bothering him, but he had failed to wipe his lips as he had hurried back here after making sure the girl had entered the backstage room. And now he was angry at the fact that Liam knew what he went to do when he didn't want anyone to know of his silly interest in a girl he knew he should stay away from but always found himself going after her. "Don't worry, your little secret is safe with me. I am not going to tell on you to your uncle nor your fiancé," Liam assured with a grin as he patted Neil's back, only to receive a deadly glare that made him put his hands up in amused surrender and back away. "I have no fiancé. Don't associate me with things I haven't given my consent for. You can go fucking tell Davina that I kissed a girl, I don't give a damn, but if General David hears of this, you know me too well," Neil said in a nonchalant tone that carried a hint of a threat.